Hello and good day to you all. It is December 23rd. We're getting that much closer, which also means it's Luke chapter 23rd time. And unfortunately for Jesus, it's the beginning of his trials. We've already kind of highlighted one of them at the end of yesterday's taping, the 7 trials of Jesus. He's got 6 to go. That's what we're going to see here throughout this chapter. And of course, the trials lead ultimately to his flogging and to his death. But that is not the end, and that is the joyful message of Easter and the joyful message even of Advent. So let us begin with verse 1. It says, "Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, 'We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he is Christ, a king.' And Pilate asked him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' And he answered them, 'You have said so.' Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, 'I find no guilt in this man.' But they were urgent, saying, 'He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place.' When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at the time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him and was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod and his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before they had been at enmity with one another. Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people and said to them, 'You brought me this man as one who is misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him.'" And pausing right there, there's actually a couple of different oddities, I'll say. Yes, Herod and Pilate were not friends. They were not friendly with one another. Herod was not happy with how Pilate was governing in his region there, and mostly because of the uproar, or the continual uproar of the Jews in his city. But odd how Jesus can bring those two together. I always kind of find that rather odd. But this line, Pilate says, "I will punish and release him." I always wonder, punish him for what? You just proclaimed that this man was innocent, that you found no guilt in him, that Herod found no guilt in him, but you're still going to punish him. I always have found that kind of peculiar in my eyes, but that's kind of me. Moving on. It says, "But they all cried out together, 'Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas,' a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder." Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify him." A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. Now, not to turn this into a political rant by any stretch, but we actually kind of see this happening today. the mob rule, which is really actually sad. The squeaky voice gets the squeaky spoke gets the oil. I get all those sayings wrong, but you understand what I'm trying to say. This is not good government, the way that they're doing things. But yet, we know on this side of the cross that this is God's eternal plan, God's plan from the very beginning of Luke. We even see it, of course, in the proclamation by Simeon, in his words and in his song, I guess I should say, that he sang in the temple. So, verse 26 says, as they led him away, they seized one Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid on him the cross to carry it behind Jesus. And there followed him a great multitude of the people, of the women, who were mourning and lamenting for him. But turning to them, Jesus said, daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, blessed are the barren and the wombs that have never bore, and the breasts that have never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry? A couple things here. This mourning and lamenting. They're beating, they're striking their chests. Is the action that's going on. They're punishing themselves. Is not necessarily punishment. They're that mad over it. The same thing with the weeping. It's not just weeping as in subtle tears. This is the same word used to describe Peter when he wept, when the cock crowed 3 times. They're crying. They're wailing of tears. And this daughters of Jerusalem, we may want to look at this and think to ourselves, Jesus is talking to the women of Jerusalem. But if you notice in your Bibles, it's probably capitalized. Daughters of Jerusalem. Of course, Jerusalem is capitalized, but daughters is probably capitalized too. And the daughters of Jerusalem is the Old Testament name for the fathers of Israel. That's what they were called. So Jesus is addressing all of Israel with these words, daughters of Jerusalem. So with that, we move on to the 2 other criminals. It says two others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him. And the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And here we see the 3 sayings of Jesus as he hung upon the cross. So see if you can hear them. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they cast lots to divide his garments. And the people stood by watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, he saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, if you're the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription over him, this is the king of the Jews. I mean, we can almost see the oozing sarcasm that Jesus is being met with right here. It says one of the criminals who was hanged railed at him, saying, are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us. Now, this is not a confession. This is not a peaceful exchange with Jesus. This is a rejection of Jesus. The ultimate rejection, you and I would say. And we know that with the words of the other one as well. It says, but the other rebuked him, saying, do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. And he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he said to him, truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. And that's a second saying of Jesus. one that we are all very familiar with. But paradise, paradise is not just sitting on the beach. This is new creation, is what this word paradise means. This newer, better place, this new creation. But when he says to Jesus, remember me, it reminds us, and that's what this word here, remember, means. It's not just simple head knowledge that warrants salvation. It's remember me. It's a personal relationship with God that is assurance of faith. We could have a head knowledge of Christ, but that is not the assurance of faith. I have a head knowledge of how to put gas in a car and how to change oil, but I'm not necessarily, that does not make me a mechanic by any stretch. Head knowledge of Christ does not make one a follower of Christ, is what I'm leading to there. So now his death. It was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. Now when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, saying, certainly this man was innocent. And all the crowds that had assembled for this spectacle, when they saw what had taken place, returned home beating their breasts. And all his acquaintances and all the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching these things. One thing about the temple curtain being torn in two, these curtains were not like, your curtains at home or my curtains at home by any stretch. The temple curtain was interwoven, so thick, 2 feet thick, so that no one and no light and no one could even they could even get a glance behind the Holy of Holies or into the Holy of Holies. It was thick on purpose, designed that way. And when it ripped in two, it was truly a sign to those in the city that this was something unique, if you will, that this really was God's Son who they had crucified. Verse 50. Now there was a man named Joseph from the Jewish town of Arimathea, who was a member of the council, a good and righteous man, who had not consented to their decision and action, and he was looking for the kingdom of God. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus, and he took it down and wrapped it in a linen shroud and laid him in a tomb cut in stone, where no one ever had been laid. It was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was beginning. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. And on the Sabbath they rested according to the commandment. Here we see the death of Christ. We see him being laid in the tomb. Day one of a 3-day rest. The prophetic word being fulfilled in our ears and right before our eyes. Well, I hope you all have a blessed day in the Lord. Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.